Hi there, this is Josh from Literary Gladiators, and today I'm here to talk about my 10 favorite poems of all time. This video I'm going to be ranking them, starting with number 10 and counting down all the way to number 1. This just so happens that this is the very first video that I film where I am in my 30s. I celebrated my 30th birthday on Monday, February 28th. And as far as feeling 30, it's just one day difference. And while the fact that time has gone by, I approach my 30s with optimism. Especially keeping in mind that Cyndi Lauper had her very first hit, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, in 1983, when she was 30 years of age, and she followed that up with many more great hits. And I know that with Literary Gladiators, I would like to, and I am hopeful that there will be many more great hits on this channel. Let's get right to counting down the list of my 10 favorite poems. Number 10 is a work of romantic poetry from the English Romanticism movement, and it was a work that I was introduced to in British literature too. And the work that comes in at number 10 is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and it can definitely be found in this anthology of English Romantic poetry. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner takes place on a ship, and the key story in mind is that of the albatross, and how the albatross comes to the ship and provides the crew with a sense of solace and hope and light in a relatively meager, bleak, and dangerous situation. The mariner, though, feels that this albatross provides a sense of false hope and needs to be ridden of. In this case, he kills the albatross and then begins to wear it around his neck. Almost as the way that I perceive it, the albatross comes forth as a Christ-like figure, providing that sense of hope to a crew that is looking for answers and something to look forward to. The thing that really stuck out with The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is how lyrical it was, but at the same time it also told such a very memorable and noteworthy story. It is one of the standout poems as far as romantic poetry is concerned, and one that I have examined and discussed, and is definitely a powerhouse poem. Number 9 on my list is my favorite Langston Hughes poem. I mentioned his short story, Thank You, Ma'am, on my best short stories list, but my favorite Langston Hughes poem is Theme for English B, which ranks at number 9 on the list, and it's inspired by Hughes's experience of being the only black student in his college class, and being assigned to write something that came to them. And Hughes, or the speaker in this poem, writes about their identity, about being a black man in an all-white classroom, and how, while he may be different, have a different background, have a different impression, he is still the same. He still has the same endeavors and the same outlook on life of wanting to succeed just as much as the instructor and those around him. And I think that this was a very strong piece of literature, one that really was heartfelt and gripped me the most as far as providing me with that sense of emotion was concerned. I was actually introduced to this in my postmodernism class, and the instructor, it really got to her as well, to the point that it always struck an emotional chord for her as well. Number 8 on my list is Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. I was first introduced to this poem at an open mic night at my college that was being held by the English Honor Society. And one of my English instructors, Dr. Moores, read this poem as part of his participation. And it really, I think that it really struck a sense of ecstasy. I think that, in my mind, wild geese in particular, going outside and seeing them fly, or seeing them fly from my window, as I look through the window, always gives me that vibrating sense of ecstasy. And this poem really capitalizes on that feeling, where the speaker in the poem is feeling weak and weary, but they see a sense of hope and optimism as they look at the freedom and happiness and determination that is coming from these wild geese. Very dedicated to their flight. And I think that if there's any poem that you can just look at and read, not to think critically, but to just take in and enjoy, I think that this is the perfect one. Number 7 on my list is from someone who's known more as being the founder of the Beats movement, despite being a renowned poet himself. And the poet that I'm talking about is Lawrence Ferlinghetti. The poem is I Am Waiting. Lawrence Ferlinghetti was the owner of City Lights bookstore in San Francisco, California, and that was where the Beats movement was founded. And while Ferlinghetti is not as explicit and colorful with his language the way that Allen Ginsberg is, and I'll be talking about him a little bit more in one of my other choices, I Am Waiting was just hysterical. The way that he went off on the way that the general population perceives their values, in particularly pertaining to the media. Just some of the lines within this poem, be it, and I am seriously waiting for Billy Graham and Elvis Presley to exchange roles seriously. And I am waiting to see God on television piped onto church altars if only they can find the right channel to tune in on. But it's just, the examination is interesting because of the way that that Ferlinghetti is approaching his world. And I just couldn't help but laugh. It was just very humorous. In a very enlightening way, but it was just something that really kept me going, and it was very, very memorable. Number 6 on my list is next to, of course, God, America, I by E.E. Cummings. And the arrangement and the food for thought is just brilliant and extraordinary, because Cummings brings to attention what it is to be a patriot. And it's told through stream of consciousness, and it breaks a lot of barriers as far as technique is concerned. It really takes the art of the written word to another level. It starts out with this idea of somebody going on a patriotic song until it gets to the point where you come to that conclusion that this is the sayer, and then you have a doer that demonstrates true patriotism, and that ends up being silent on the basis of sacrificing your life for war. It can also be viewed in the way that this person had this sense of patriotism, but then realizes that it also means fighting in war. I made the argument in our Season 8 discussion that this is one voice, and it was very memorable to be able to sway Larry's decision on that accord. And the fact that the poem ends with the speaker winding themselves up so much that they have to reach over and grab a glass of water. And that's where it really breaks into what you would call the fourth wall. Number 5 on my list is probably the first poem that I can say that I enjoyed. And that would be The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And it's just it has a very engaging story, if you can call something engaging in the world of horror, and the idea of somebody going into a residence, a haunted residence, coming into contact with a raven that quoths nevermore, and being surrounded within such a creepy environment. I did for Poetry Month during 8th grade, we had to do a report on a poet. I did Edgar Allan Poe, and we had to write a poem inspired by the poet that we were doing our report on. And so I spoofed it and did something funnier in a poem called The Pigeon. And it was set during a poker game between friends of mine and I. But this is completely different. This is a poem with a more horrific atmosphere. And during anytime we do an open mic night for Halloween, if nobody else has read the poem, I will read the poem. I did it at least twice. But I think that The Raven is something that really has stuck out to me for my years as a reader. And I also recall going to a presentation at Allaire State Park where Helen McKenna, who is an expert on Edgar Allan Poe, she has worked at Edgar Allan Poe's house, which is a historical site in Philadelphia, and she does a presentation where she performs first as Virginia, who was Edgar Allan Poe's young wife, and then performs as Edgar Allan Poe himself, and she will recite as Edgar Allan Poe The Raven, Cask of Amontillado, and The Bells. And those always make for really good performances. The poet that I argue as being the greatest of all time, in my mind, is Robert Frost. I feel that Robert Frost takes on a genre of his own, where while he wrote during the modernist movement, I think that he really resembles something completely different and standing on his own. I think that a lot of his work it explores human thought and the way that humans approach situations in society. For instance, The Road Not Taken, we often interpret it as somebody being forced to choose between two different things that have their pros and cons, and then ultimately making the decision that made the great difference. But in actuality, it is a poem about indecisiveness, and Frost poking fun at his friend for being so indecisive. Number 4 on my list is another poem of his, though, and that is Mending Wall. And Mending Wall has to do with what inspires one's values and how people conform on the basis of them. The fact that you have the speaker questioning why is his neighbor bothering to build a fence that really doesn't serve a great purpose. The only thing that the neighbor can say and think is, great fences make great neighbors. And this is inspired by a family belief. And the whole poem in general says a lot about conformity based off of, not what one believes based off of an individual thought-out decision, but based off of what has been fed to them, be it what has been told to them by their parental figures, or by their religion, or by their political beliefs. And you see a lot of that where people are mindlessly inspired to make certain decisions. And I think that Robert Frost is very clever when it comes to incorporating that into this particular poem. I had also enjoyed Home Burial by Frost, but Mending Wall has been the one that has really stuck with me, especially within the last so many years. Number 3 on my list is The Starry Night by Anne Sexton. Anne Sexton, to me, is my favorite of the confessional poets. I think that she's very blunt and straightforward with what she has to say. She's really been a strong voice as far as approaching sensitive or more feminist topics are concerned. But The Starry Night combines one's approach to a work of art and a work of art that happens to be a favorite of mine. Vincent van Gogh is a favorite painter, and The Starry Night is my favorite Van Gogh painting. This poem here has to do with Sexton's individual response and how she is longing to be immersed in the beauty of a starry night. And being someone, being a poet that had dealt with depression, I think that it really makes the message of the poem even stronger, and there's a greater yearning coming from her. Number 2 on this list is the poem that made me love poetry and told me that poetry has no boundaries. And that is Howl by Allen Ginsberg. I read this for the first time in my American Literature 2 class with Dr. Bordelon. Up until that point, what turned me off from poetry was how I felt that it was restricted and how it needed to follow a sense of order in some way, shape, or form. But after reading Howl, I realized that there was no boundaries. Howl is the exploration that everybody has a voice, even those that are not accepted by society for any given reason. During this time, a lot of it had to do with being part of the LGBTQ plus community. There's also a sense of those that have substance abuse or are not accepted for another reason. And Ginsberg does not hold back. He is very colorful with his language. He does not care how he is expressing himself, and that really, I think it really says it says once and for all that this is what I have to say, this is how I'm going to say it, and you are not going to forget it. And it lingers like a howl where there is such agony, but by the end, Ginsberg is looking to he's looking for you to get an idea as to what he is saying. And he's reworked this so many times, but I think that what he was aiming to do is say what he needed to say, and at the end of the day, it really paid off. Number 1 on my list is number 1 on the basis that it really speaks to me. I think that it really says a lot about what I see in life, how I want to approach life and accomplish my goals, and how well one wants to obtain their goals. They want to remain modest, and they also want to remain wanting. My favorite poem of all time is Prayer by Louis Untermeyer. Louis Untermeyer is known for being an anthologist who collected and put together a lot of literature collections that were studied as American literature was beginning to be studied. We didn't start studying American literature in an academic setting until 1925, and around this time, Untermeyer was the premier collector as far as anthologies were concerned. But he was also a renowned and respected poet. And reading and hearing him read prayer really spoke wonders in my mind, because he does make mention to the fact that he prays to have the strive to get to where he wants to be, but at the same time not get to a point where he is not in a state of needing to accomplish things. The strongest, probably the way that this closes is just so powerful, and I'm going to recite. From compromise and things half done, keep me with stern and stubborn pride, and when at last the fight is won, God, keep me still unsatisfied. I think that there's a lot that goes into not just achieving your goals, but the journey that comes with being able to get there. And the other great thing that this poem does is embracing who you are as a person and being able to never forget the roots to which you have come, and not forget what who you were before becoming what you ultimately wanted to be. And I think that that sense, being able to keep in touch with that sense, is something that, even though we can't really, we have difficulty pinpointing it or acknowledging it, I think that we all have that sense of it in our subconscious, and Untermeyer does a great job recollecting that within this poem at hand. And it just so happened that I was looking for the collection, and it just so happened that it was in his first collection. This is a reprint of Challenge. I want to thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you check out some more videos from our channel, and if you like what you see, please subscribe to our channel, because we have a lot of great videos going up, and the contributors on this channel are doing a remarkable job. If you enjoyed this video, please give this a good old like, and if you want to keep talking about it in the comments, feel free to do so. I would love to keep this conversation going. And if you really, really like what you see, please support our channel on Patreon, for the money that we make will allow us to provide you, the viewer, with even more great content. Thank you, and for now, keep reading.